Hey, how's it going, guys? Before you get into today's podcast, I just want to say that 50% of my viewers aren't subscribed. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It would be greatly appreciated to have you guys back for the next podcast and other videos on the channel. Also, I want to say that I will be streaming on Twitch. I got my new microphone, so I'm really excited about that. I'll remind you guys at the end of today's podcast that I will be streaming on twitch.tv at 1 p.m. Eastern Time today, June 30th, and also every other day. I will put a schedule down below. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy. And I'll see you guys soon. Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to a brand new podcast. This is the first one we're doing on the channel, and I'm gonna try not to redo these podcasts too often. I've already restarted twice, but I'm just gonna try and talk, get through it, and see how it goes. I'm not gonna claim that this is gonna be the best podcast you'll listen to today, or if you are only listening to this one, I would recommend going to listen to another one. This is not gonna be the best one. This is the first ever one, so we're going to see how it goes. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to enjoy this one. It's been about a week since I uploaded, so just bear with me. This is a test. This is all new to me, and I want to make it the best as possible, but I'm not claiming that this is going to be amazing, so just enjoy it. However long this podcast is, I'm going to be talking about two main topics today, some really, really big things in the NHL. The first one is there has been 26 confirmed cases in the NHL since June 8th, which is not great, one of them being Austin Matthews, obviously, and we don't know the other 25. For some reason, they don't have to be ratted out, and that could be a whole other conversation. Maybe I'll go over that as well. And then my second topic is the lottery draft. If you had not missed it, or if you did miss it, I should have said, you would know if you didn't miss it, that the top seed, the top number one pick, not the top seed, that's not the right wording, the number one pick in the draft is none other than a play-in team. We don't know which one yet, but there will be 8 teams, I believe it is, that will be at a 12.5% chance to win the first overall pick, and we don't know who it is. It could be Pittsburgh, it could be Toronto, it could be... well, it can't be Tampa Bay, they're already in. It could be Montreal. There's a lot of teams that we can discuss whether they deserve it or not, but there are some teams like Detroit who got shafted, and it creates an interesting thing. There was Tim and Sid on, and I think there was a conversation about just completely getting rid of the lottery draft, so we'll take a look at that and whether that's actually a good idea and what that would implement in change for a completely wow, I can't speak English. What I'm saying is to remove the draft completely, and to not the draft but the lottery draft, and to change it in a different way and affect it differently. And basically I think the idea is to give everybody a fair playing field, no matter how you do, or at least in terms of the bottom seed teams, everybody has a fair chance, and it's not just the worst team gets the highest chances, because it basically incentivizes tanking. And that's what I'll have to talk about when it comes to the play-in rounds. Will tanking be an issue? So let's talk about the first thing here. COVID-19 has been a huge thing in the news, obviously, no doubt. It's been in our lives, 4 months or so? It's been a big problem for a lot of people, but we're coming to sports, and we're talking about sports. Sports have been on hold for a long time. The only sports that have returned are a handful, NASCAR, stuff like that, have returned. A lot of European leagues have returned to play for soccer or football, whichever you want to call it. So a lot of things have returned to play. And it looks all good and dandy. It looks like we're slowly coming back to a full circle in sports. We're going to finally be able to see some things, but there are a few leagues that haven't had a return date, and one of them is the NHL. Now, the NHL has proposed their phase 2, which started already, and we thought, yes, this is progress. We're going to have the season restart. It's going to be fun. And then there's talks about certain players like Carey Price, not sure if he's going to return, although it does seem like that. I will go into detail about that after. And also, we'll look at Austin Matthews' situation while we're talking about COVID. And so we had a return to play since June, and we already have had a few players get COVID, and a whole Tampa Bay facility needing to be closed down, and 26 players confirmed, or I'm not sure if it's players, maybe it's a mix of players and staff members being confirmed to have COVID, which is, I know 26 isn't a lot out of the amount that they had, 26 out of, I believe, 1,400 that they accounted for, so it isn't a lot, right? It's a very small amount, but still. If you don't remember, when this whole pandemic started, we talked about how, there's just a few people, a couple hundred people, maybe, such a small amount, it's not going to be a big problem. And then all of a sudden, Bam, just like that, it spreaded, and now we're right here, and I'm talking to you in the middle of it, in the midst of the pandemic, and it's just interesting how we seem to be so naive about it. We're it's only a couple of players, whatever, it's not a problem, and then and then we just kind of get into the same situation we're in right now. It's just that it could be worse for the players since the whole idea of the hub cities is to put them all in the same area. And I talk to people on Instagram. Although, to be fair, I will say this: if you ever talk to someone on Instagram about an opinion about hockey, usually they are super defensive and they try to insult you because you're wrong. So I commented on one of these posts, and the post was basically, oh, 26 players isn't a lot per se, but it's still something to think about. And I replied with, oh, yeah, it's a really good thing to think about. Like what happens when we put all these players in their hub cities? Like what's going to happen? What if someone gets it? And then someone replied to me saying, oh, but there's a 99.2% recovery rate, or basically saying that 99% of people don't die from it. And which is probably accurate, right? 99% of people recover, and there's a very low mortality rate with this virus, which is great because we've been working hard to not have a high mortality rate, because it still could be high, and the only reason that it isn't high is because, frankly, thank goodness, we are all working together to not spread the virus, because there's no vaccine yet, and there's a lot of still mystery to this virus that we don't know yet. So we don't know the total effects of it. And it's an interesting situation. So when he said that to me, I thought to myself, well, okay, but I don't care if there's a 99.99% immortality rate, and we're all fine. We'll be totally. I keep hitting my mic stand. We'll be totally fine. Everybody will be safe. The small chance that one person gets sick in the hub city, in the hotel, because that is how it's gonna work, is that, from what I believe, it's not been confirmed, but I believe right now it's either gonna be Edmonton or Vancouver, and then Vegas seems to be constantly linked with it. And let's just say it's Vegas and Edmonton, okay? So I know for a fact that Edmonton was willing to put all the players who were playing in the Edmonton hub city into a hotel right across from the arena, and they would allow for a bunch of things. A bunch of different floors would have different things, watching areas, areas where you can meet and everything like that. And I think it'd be a lot of fun, right? I don't know how the I can't speak English. I don't know how the rivals would work. If you're playing a team in the playoffs, I don't know if you want to go meet up with them and be like, "Hey, how you doing? Oh yeah, remember when you slammed me into the boards from behind? Yeah, nice to see you." No, it's like, obviously players most of the time are very, very nice to each other off the ice. There are a few here and there examples. Leipzig is the most recent example of off-ice conduct that wasn't really great. But we look at, these teams and these players, they're probably really great friends off the ice. A lot of them are countrymen. A lot of them are just good friends off the ice. And, it'd just be fun. That'd be kind of cool. Imagine Pittsburgh and Washington going one round two or something like that, and then they talk to each other off the ice. Ovechkin and Crosby are just hanging out. That'd be kind of cool, but we can only wish. We all wish that they were best friends, and that would be kind of cool. But either way, that's not the point of this story. The point of this story, of why I'm talking about hub cities, is because the idea of isolation, if all the players are tested positive, tested negative, right, and they're all good to go into the series, it's an interesting thing to just make sure that they are completely isolated, because they can't go out. And that's the whole point that Edmonton was trying to make, is that they're going to allow for a bunch of things to happen in the hotel, to make it as small reason to leave the hotel. There should be really no reason to leave that area. There are, I believe, some restaurants nearby that they will bring them to with a variety of foods and stuff like that. That's what I heard. So the whole idea of this is that they're going to spend tons of money, which there's a whole, you can go into a whole debate about whether or not this is really worth it. You're giving these guys who are already making millions and millions of dollars this opportunity of a lifetime to just live in a certain situation where they don't have to go out and do all these things, and then you're going to spend all this time testing these guys, and why not test people who actually need to be tested, stuff like that. But either way, that's a whole other debate. But let's just focus on sports here. If you look at the Edmonton proposal, it's a really great proposal, and eliminates the worries of players needing to run around the hub cities to grab some things that they need, and it's all going to be provided for them, which is great, and it's all fine and dandy. But the issue is, what if something happens? What if there is a staff member who lies and gets sick, and he passes it on to the rest of the, um, you know, to the rest of the league? That could happen, because it's not necessary that they're going to test every single person. They could miss a person. It is a possibility. Okay, but let's say they test everybody, right? There are cases of the virus that don't show up immediately, but they show up later on. How often are they going to test? They going to test every single day, or are they going to test every time that they leave the building to go to the arena and then back they'll test? How are they going to do it? I don't really know their plan for that. And it just seems like there's a lot of blanks where safety needs to be checked on for the NHL. It seems like there are certain scenarios that could come to life if not careful. And is it worth it in the end? Because really, if I look at this NHL plan and I'm thinking really hard about it, and I'm not just thinking as a hockey fan, but I'm thinking as a person who is thinking for the best, for the safety of the players and for the ultimate outcome for the NHL, if I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, the only reason why the season is even being considered is because they want those TV contracts to be fulfilled. That's the only reason. And that is the only reason. I think I said this when I made a small little conversation about the 2014 playoff format. The only reason you see some of these teams, like Montreal, especially, a team that was never even going to be considered for the playoffs, the only reason they're there is because of this contract, because of their obligation to fulfill the rights for the TV. And the NHL can make their money. And it's a really interesting scenario. Is it going to make an impact? Like, literally the only reason half these teams are there is because they have obligations to fulfill their contracts, and that's about it. I mean, I don't see another reason why the NHL would even consider to add all these teams. So it's an interesting scenario, and I don't know how I feel exactly about it. And some players don't feel too excited about returning to play. I know for a fact that there was an article about Carey Price. He recently did an interview, and the article was from the Atlantic, the Athletic, and it was basically titled "Carey Price's Ambitions for Hockey and Life Goals Are Colliding," and he has a kid on the way. He has, I believe, 2 kids already. I can't remember right now. Basically, what I'm saying is that he's a family, and he has to decide whether risking playing hockey for his team, and the chance of maybe winning a Stanley Cup is worth it, compared to him being there for his family in a time where there's a chance that he, knock on wood, he may not return, or and no, not even just return. Maybe he just gets sick and he has to separate from his family for a while, and that would just be really unfortunate. And I imagine you, as a somebody going to do something, let's say you go and you go out to camp with something, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of a scenario where you are left your family for a bit and you get sick, and then you can't return immediately because you don't want to get the rest of your family sick. And kids are vulnerable, although there are reports that they aren't as vulnerable as we think they are, but adults are too, and you never know. Some people react differently, and I know there was one argument that I read on Instagram. Oh, but athletes are probably not going to get sick. They're super athletic, they're in really good shape, they're in good health. But there are people who can be extremely healthy. There are many cases in the early start of this whole pandemic that there were really, really healthy people, young people, 20 years old or so, that got sick. And some of them unfortunately passed away. So there's still that scenario. And if you think that, we figured it out. The only thing we've figured out so far for this virus is how to stop the spread. We haven't figured out how to help those people who do get sick. We have found small things, but not enough to really put hockey players or even anybody in the situation that they might get sick and stuff like that. So when it comes to hockey players and it comes to people like that, there really doesn't seem like a proper reasoning behind starting the season up when there's so many questions to be answered. And for Carey Price, his main concerns when I read the article was there are a lot of questions to be answered, and I don't know the answers, and I want to know where the NHL stands on this whole, how to keep the players safe and stuff like that. And I could see his reasoning behind why he doesn't want to return to play, and it makes sense to me, and I understand it, and I would be in his boots too. I mean, he does make a ton of money, so it's not for the money he's doing it. I don't know how much the players are going to make for returning to play. I don't know if their contracts are fulfilled or whatnot. I don't really know how that would work. Maybe they're making less because of the pandemic. I don't know. Anyways, so that is one of the main things that Carey Price is worried about. Is we're unsure. Everybody's unsure. I'm unsure, even talking to you guys right now. But with the reports of the 26 new cases since June 8th, what are we, the 29th right now? We're 21 days later, 26 cases. Doesn't look too good. And I know it's a tiny amount in a grand scheme of players that were tested, but still, you have to be. I'd rather it be a lot lower than that, and we just don't know the total effects and what will happen when these hub cities are brought in, because Vegas is not the worst place in the States right now. That is true, but are they going to lock them down? Are they going to lock them down in hotels? Because if anything, the States is more likely to spread the virus than it is in Canada. And what if a player goes out in Vegas and there's somebody that isn't from the state and they are coming in? Why do I call Vegas the state? It's not a state, but you know what I mean. Somebody who goes to Vegas isn't from that area, and they come in and they're from, I don't know, Minnesota, and they come in and they spread it per se. Who knows? Because the restrictions for the players aren't quite obvious yet. I'm assuming that they won't allow them to go out while they're in phase 3 for the ability to return and get into the playoffs. Who knows? We still don't know. Last thing to talk about is the draft. So if you didn't see the draft or heard about it, I'm sure you did by now, because it's been, a week almost? No, it's not been a week. It's been like 4 days since the draft. There's been talks about how the draft is totally rigged and people are getting annoyed by it. So I'm just going to talk about the first issue about this draft, is the fact that the number 1 pick, Alexis Lafreniere, can go to a playoff team. Well, not a playoff team, but a play-in round team. A team that won't make it into the playoffs, it can go to them. And people are thinking, well, that's not really fair. How come a team who has a chance to make the playoffs, or is trying to make the playoffs with the play-in rounds, has a chance to make it into the first overall pick? And, well, for one thing, I just want to get this out there right now. This draft was totally rigged. There is no doubt. I mean, you cannot argue at all that the NHL was like, oh wow, what a lucky draw. The play-in, one of the play-in teams is going to be able to win the first overall pick. There's not a single soul here that thinks that was not rigged. I think everybody agrees that this is rigged. It's for views, because for ratings. I mean, you look at it. We haven't had sports for a long time. People haven't watched sports for a long time. They lost a lot of revenue. Why not spice it up and get more people to watch? It's so obvious. There's no doubt. Okay. So let's push that past us. The NHL rigged it. This is probably it, begs the question, how many times has the NHL rigged the draft? But, they rigged it. Now we move on. I mean, to be fair, if the NHL rigged the draft more often, Edmonton wouldn't have won so many picks, because it seems like Gary Bettman really likes the United States. So, I don't think Edmonton would have won that many drafts. But anyways, that's just my take on it. So the draft is rigged. The NHL has made a to be determined team, which is a play-in team. All the play-in teams, everybody who loses in the play-in rounds, could be Pittsburgh, could be Montreal, it could be Toronto. Can you imagine that? Toronto picking up Alexis Lafreniere? I don't know if they'd be able to sign him though. Maybe if they got rid of Nylander. That's the only player I could see them getting rid of and being able to make space for Lafreniere if he agrees to sign to a small contract. But even then, will it happen if they get him? I don't know. We don't know. That's another video. Podcast, whatever you want to call it. So the chances of a play-in team comes down to 12.5%. Each team gets 12.5% chance when being drawn. Now, I'm going to say this right now. I think that Montreal, the Canadiens, have a very, very high chance of getting it, because if they've rigged it already so that a team in the playoffs can get a first overall pick, then I wouldn't be surprised if they rig it towards Montreal. Because one thing, Montreal was supposed to host the draft this season. Now, I'm not saying that was, they were going to rig it in their favor in the first place, but they do owe them something. So maybe this first overall pick is going to be what they owe. Who knows? So we're looking at that. It could be a possibility. I really wouldn't be surprised if Montreal somehow wins it, but that comes down to Montreal. Do they want to win or lose? So I'm going to move on to the next topic here. Win or lose, what is your take? I mean, do these play-in teams, does the Penguins go, okay, we have a few players back, but do we really have the best odds to go on? Are we the best team right now? Like, what happens if they play the first game and they feel like, oh, okay, we're playing against Montreal, another team who, imagine Pittsburgh goes, yeah, I want to tank, and then Montreal goes, no, I want to tank. So both teams are trying to tank, and you have 10 goal games or something, right? It's obvious. That's the issue with this whole to be determined first overall pick. If it was a second overall pick or third overall pick, it would have been like, oh, okay, they could tank for a third overall pick. That's not so bad. If you lose in the playoffs, darn, you're out. But you get a third overall pick. That's amazing. But the fact that it's a first overall pick, the fact that it's first in the draft, is what makes it so terrible and suspicious for the NHL, because it's such an incentive for teams to just go out and say, you know what, we don't really want to win the Stanley Cup because we have a chance at a generational player. I mean, Pittsburgh could benefit huge from this, with Gensel still pretty young and Malkin not getting any younger, Crosby not getting any younger. This could be their best player to take over the franchise and continue to grow this team in the right direction. So, you have these questions, right? And then Montreal, I mean, a team who's been fighting for a first overall pick for the longest time, trying their best to bring in top players. Imagine going with Kotkaniemi and then getting their first overall pick the season after. That would be something that they've been waiting for the longest time. And then you look at Toronto. I mean, we all know Toronto will have the smallest chance to win it, mainly because they just the ability for them to not really sign him is a very, 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 very real possibility, because we could see Lafreniere be signed by Toronto. He can sign his entry-level contract, but I could see him easily being traded later on because of the fact that they decide between Nylander, a guy who's been in the system for a long time, or Lafreniere, who, I mean, even then, will they be able to sign him? Anyways, that's a whole other debate. So, you see these teams who really do need this first overall pick, but do they deserve it? Because Pittsburgh was, well on their way to making a playoff appearance, right? But they just barely missed it, and then they got put into this 2014 playoff format. And the same goes for Toronto. As much as I didn't want them to make the playoffs, because, who really likes Toronto? I'm just kidding. Even if they weren't going to make the playoffs, they were working hard, and they might have made the playoffs either way. So they're getting a chance to get a first overall pick. There are teams here in the ability in the play-in rounds that should have been in the playoffs. They were just barely in, that could have made the playoffs, and now they have the ability to get the first overall pick. So it kind of creates this issue where these teams might just tank right in front of our faces, and that is a debate that was happening on Tim and Sid, where they talked about how the lottery draft is a terrible format for sports because it allows for teams to just go, forget it. We're just going to be really bad this season and just, tank the entire season. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, Detroit did that, but there are a lot of people who are saying, well, Detroit actually just really sucked. I mean, maybe they tanked a little bit harder towards the end of the season, but overall, they were just not a really good team, and they weren't playing really well. Because if you really think about it, the logic behind that, yes, a manager can rig the team to make them, send decent players down and bring, somewhat questionable players up and not really make moves for a proper goaltender, stuff like that. So you can look at the league that way, right? And you can look at managers doing those type of sketchy things to make their team lose. But overall, at the end of the day, the players just want to win. They just want to play, and they just want to win for their team, because every player in their mind thinks, yeah, I think I can make the playoffs. It's always a possibility. And I don't think they ever rig. I mean, to be honest, I never think that a team tanks that hard for a playoffs, for a first overall pick, because frankly, when's the last time a team that really, really deserved a first overall pick get that pick? I mean, maybe it was Edmonton, but I don't think they were bottom of the league. Maybe they were second to bottom and they won the draft. So it's all up in the air. Who knows what will happen with the to be determined team, because Montreal would have been in the running for a first overall pick. Maybe they actually would have won it. Who knows? But now we're sitting here wondering, was this the right choice from the league? And I really can't give you anything positive about this thing, because the only reason why this whole to be determined team is here is for ratings, and it's really hard to give you another explanation. It's really hard to go, well, this scenario would have shown up either way. No, it's really just for ratings, and it's sad to see, because I would have been like really okay with if a team like Ottawa got first overall pick, or Detroit, the teams that actually deserve to get it. And I was actually prepared to start watching Ottawa games and Detroit games if they ended up getting them, or the Sabres, who knows. And by the way, Buffalo, I'm so sorry what happened to you. Again, shafted in the draft, just overall, your team franchise wise. I really hope Eichel decides to work hard and stay there. It seems like he does. It's really a shame what's going on over there. I'm sorry if you're a Buffalo fan. But yes, we'll go back to the topic. To be determined team. It's rigged. It's totally for ratings. It's really sad to see as a longtime hockey fan, somebody who just wants realism and just fairness in the league. This is the wrong step for the NHL, and it opens up the door for a lot of questions whether they do this more often than not or whatnot. It's just really, really unfortunate. And a lot of people thought that when the people are getting annoyed the fact that like a team like Chicago has an opportunity to win it and stuff like that. It's just, well, that's just more a people are annoyed when a top original six team gets a chance to win it. They think it's rigged. But really, if you look at it, Chicago's not really that great of a team. They were playing better, but they're not that great of a team either. And Montreal's not really that great of a team. But then Toronto, a team who's made the playoff consistently and lost consistently, but that doesn't matter. They shouldn't really have the best chance to win a first overall pick either. So that's a debate I can agree on. Teams who don't really deserve it but might actually win it is a really great argument, and especially a team like Pittsburgh, who has such great talent right now. Do they really deserve to get a first overall pick with such great coaching? Maybe not, but hey, the NHL has made its decision, and that's what we have to deal with. So, where do you guys stand on this? Do you think that the NHL's to be determined team first overall pick is really good? I think no. It's stupid. It creates more problems than it really. It's just a dumb idea. Really, it's just not worth it. So that's where I stand on that. So that is my first podcast. That is the end of our first ever podcast. About half an hour long, not the longest, but hey, half an hour episodes of me talking about things, maybe 45 minutes is pretty good, I'd say. I feel like an hour might be a little bit too long. I don't really have like the greatest thing to talk about. Maybe if I have more topics, but half an hour for maybe two topics we talked about is pretty good. So I'll quickly recap here for you guys. The Montreal Canadiens have a chance to win a first overall pick, and so do any other play-in teams. They can be Toronto, Pittsburgh, you name it. These guys, big teams, can win the first overall pick, whether they deserve it or not, because the NHL wanted to rig the draft for ratings, and it's a terrible thing because now teams who really do want to make the playoffs, they have to decide between, do we want to go for a Stanley Cup? Like, let's use quickly Montreal as an example here. Montreal has Carey Price. He really wants to win a Stanley Cup, and he really wants to go on and prove to everybody he's a top goaltender in the league, and he deserves a Stanley Cup. And we all know that, even if you don't like Carey Price, and he hasn't been great in the last few seasons, he deserves a Stanley Cup. Same thing for Henrik Lundqvist. They deserve Stanley Cups, right? So this is Carey Price's maybe final chance, because let's see if Montreal makes the playoffs next season. It's his final chance to make it from sheer luck of the 24-team playoff format. He's able to make the playoffs. Does he want to go for it, or does his team say, no, Carey, don't try too hard. We want to get that first overall pick. So it creates that, what's next? Because frankly, if you look online, you look at Montreal, their fans really just want the first overall pick, and I think that'd be kind of cool to get that guy, and maybe he might be able to carry you to the Stanley Cup playoffs. So who knows? You never know. Anyways, so that creates the question: tank or Stanley Cup? Which one do you want? It's a terrible choice by the league. Terrible choice. But either way, let's move on to the first topic we talked about, which was COVID in the NHL. 26 cases since June 8th. Is it going to be a good idea to restart the season? And at this point, like with the draft being the way that it is, it seems like the only choice is to start the season up. So who knows? Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this first ever podcast. It was a lot of fun. It was just an experiment. I honestly don't remember exactly everything I talked about because it was just like half an hour ago. But either way, I'm going to try my best to increase the quality of these podcasts to better my ability to talk to you guys. Anyways, it was a lot of fun, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you made it to the end of this, I will say this now, and I might edit it at the beginning of the podcast. I will be streaming on Twitch now. I have a new microphone. I've been using it this entire podcast. I have a new microphone, so I will be streaming on Twitch around 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, so I will be live. You can come check me out on PuckLuck TV, on twitch.tv. It'll be linked in the description. Anyways, guys, if you're new, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys later.